I'm Misty, and I am a Senior Fund Development Director with Girl Scouts Spirit in Nebraska. This is backyard bird watching as part of our Girl Scouts at Home project. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you are healthy and staying active. Today we are going over what bird watching is, what kind of birds we have here in Nebraska in our own backyards, how we can identify them, and what we can do to attract more of them if you want to. I live in a rural part of southeastern Nebraska, and I became interested in birds because I noticed all of them that I have here in my own backyard. And as you can maybe tell by the noises around me, sometimes my backyard sounds like a rainforest. That and my mom, who's my neighbor, would say things like, "Hey, there's a warbler," or "That's a chickadee." And I kind of wanted to learn what she meant when she would say that. So being a bird nerd is pretty fun, and birds are really spunky and they all have a lot of personality, and they can be really obnoxious too. So it's really fun being a bird nerd. So I want to share some of that with all of you and hopefully teach you something along the way. So what exactly is backyard bird watching other than just watching birds in your backyard? It's really learning how to identify them and understand them in your backyard. So things you need to bird watch: your eyes, and maybe some binoculars if you want to look at birds high up in trees. A good reference book. I have some here that I really like. This is All the Backyard Birds. I'll show you that one right here. This is an East version and that's flipped. I apologize for that. It's just kind of a pocket guide. And this one is Birds of Eastern and Central North America, or just a good bird identifying app. I really like Merlin Bird ID. And a journal. I always recommend a journal because it's good to document what you find. Being a bird watcher and identifying birds means paying attention to the colors of birds, the shapes and sizes of birds, the behaviors of birds, the patterns of birds that you're seeing years over year, the foods they like to eat and where they eat it, where they nest and where they're living, and their songs and their sounds. And so let's dive into each of those a little bit further. So what we mean by their color is pretty simple. The birds that we have here in Nebraska are super colorful. We have birds of almost every color of the rainbow. So blue, red, orange, yellow, black, gray, white, you name it, we have it. So the color of a bird can be really helpful in identifying what kind of bird it is. So using our book and then also using one of those apps. And ironically, male birds are really colorful, more colorful, and sometimes really the only bird that's colorful in a species than the female. So with birds, the male is trying to attract the female, and so it's bright and colorful, whereas the female will either be brown or sometimes dull. So in one of my favorites, the Oriole, the Baltimore Oriole, the male is bright orange and the female is kind of dull. Sometimes she's yellow or kind of yellow orange. Still both really pretty birds, but the male is always much brighter and bolder than the female. The shape and the size of a bird is pretty important. In Nebraska, we have really teeny tiny birds, almost as small as a golf ball, and then we have really large birds to the size of big dogs. So when we're thinking about our birds and the size of birds that we have, I'm going to share some photos with you. We think about teeny tiny birds. The first bird that we probably think about is a hummingbird. And this is a ruby-throated hummingbird. And a ruby-throated hummingbird is very small and it flutters its wings really fast, right? And they feed at those clear and red feeders. But another really small bird that we have in Nebraska is a wren. And wrens are these cute little tan and brown birds. They look just like this. And they usually live in little birdhouses with teeny tiny little holes, but you'll see them a lot on the top of fence posts and on the ends of trees. They don't live really high up in trees, but they are teeny tiny little birds. Very, very cute. And then larger birds that we have, when you think of larger birds in Nebraska, obviously you think of the sandhills crane that looks just like that. There's one with her babies. And you think of things like a turkey vulture. This right here is a turkey vulture. And we see turkey vultures a lot. They tend to circle like in the sky. They kind of like circle around roadkill and stuff like that. We also think of the bald eagle. We get a lot of bald eagles in Nebraska. And the barn owl, which is beautiful. Lots of owls in Nebraska. When you're looking at a bird, is it landing, on the branch, or is it landing on the bark of a tree? So that's really telling too about a bird. Birds that land on the bark of the tree and are kind of scaling the tree, a lot of times those are nuthatches or woodpeckers. Like a sparrow wouldn't really be able to land on the tree like this way. I'm looking at the tree behind me, and kind of scale it. They'd have to land on a branch this way and kind of move along the branch this way. Some birds are always in groups, like goldfinches. Here's pictures of goldfinches. These are often a favorite of people. Other ones you see are always just by themselves. Here is a red-breasted grosbeak, another favorite. Some are lovebirds that you always see with their partners. Here are some doves. Other things to know about bird behaviors are if they're social or if they're loners. And what I mean by that is if they are only ever around birds of their own species, or if you see them intermingling. Do you only ever see them at the feeder, say, by themselves, or do you see them with all other feeders? So if they're hungry, they don't care. They are gonna go get something to eat, whether or not there's a goldfinch and a red-breasted grosbeak there. They don't care, they're going to eat. Or do they wait until there are no other birds there to eat? Those are some interesting things to look at for their behavior. Birds like sparrows are really social and they don't care. They will go and they want to talk to everybody and be around everybody. They think it's a party and they just want to hang around everybody. They're social butterflies. But birds like orioles are not so social. So here is a sparrow. These are social butterflies. Here is an oriole, not so social, more of a loner. Our patterns year over year are very important as well. Are we seeing the birds all year long? So are the birds staying here in Nebraska all year long like our turkeys? Do the turkeys stay in your backyard all year long? Cardinals, another favorite. They stay throughout the winter. Those are very pretty in the wintertime when there's snow on the ground and you see a cardinal. Or do you only see them in the spring and the summer, like my favorite, the indigo bunting, or the robin? Are your hummingbirds showing up every May? Are your robins showing up every March? So those are really great things you can note in your journal. Birds in Nebraska eat a lot of different things. The bigger birds are eating things like mice and frogs. Smaller birds eat worms and insects, seeds and berries, and their diets are really, really diverse, just depending on what the birds are. So I'm going to walk you through some of the food that backyard birds actually eat by showing you how I feed birds in my yard. Okay, so as you can see, this is kind of my feeder setup, and I have some barriers set up along the outside here with a rubber matting. And the reason for that is obviously because seed will drop down and weeds will grow, as you can kind of see they do around the outside here. I have grass planted here, and so I don't want weed to get into the grass. And what happens is if I don't put this barrier here, I will have a mess, as I sometimes already do. Because the seed or the weeds will grow up around the base of these poles that I have the feeders hung on here. I also have this, which is a hood, because squirrels like to jump from the trees onto feeders, and squirrels will dump your feeders if they have access to it. They are acrobatic. There have been times when I have seen squirrels hanging upside down from that feeder. They are quite acrobatic. So anyways, let's take a look at some of the feed. This is seed. Right now I am feeding a mixture of a lot of things. In the springtime, I tend to feed mostly just plain black oil sunflower seed. It's very hardy and it's what a lot of birds need at that time. Right now, they're needing more seed because things are in full bloom. So there are sunflowers out in the field right now and they're able to get some of those seeds. And so they're not able to get these little seeds right here. So that's what that looks like. Here's just a regular thing. This is an insight into another one of those feeders. It's a good mixture. Here are some peanuts. And here's another fun one. These are mealworms. Let's see if we can give you good insight. This is what dried mealworms look like. So these are not alive, they're dry. I also feed these to my chickens. And this is just a good, kind of a treat for them. I use this because it keeps them dry and it keeps the rain out. This right here is kind of a blend. So this actually has different kinds of shelled seeds, peanuts, and berries, dried berries. And when I pour this from the bag to the feeder, it actually, you can see some large berries in it occasionally. So as I'm looking around here, here's a berry. There's raisins, there's cherries, berries, pine nuts, different kind of seeds in the actual feeder or in the blend itself. And then this feeder, you can see birds have been eating off of it. The seed just falls down, but they're very, very picky. So they will sit at a feeder and you can see they really like this brown seed because they've eaten a lot of it from here. So they will sit here and they'll be like, nope, don't like that one. Nope, don't like that one. And they'll throw it down on the ground. It makes a big mess. And usually I'll come over here and I'll clean this up. But if we take a look at the ground here, you'll see that a lot of those have been shelled, which means the birds actually do shell them, eat the seed inside, and then dispose of that. And I have noticed lately that a lot of turkeys have been up here eating this too, so it's not really going to waste. So I will clean this up and I will dispose of this. So here's kind of another look at some of my feeders, different kinds of feeders. So for you, Girl Scouts, I would say you can buy your feed at the grocery store, at any of your good stores, and you can buy feeders there as well, but I would challenge you to build one yourselves. Be innovative and build one yourselves. Another type of feeder is a soot feeder, and this is just a cake right here, and it's hung in these baskets in places like trees, and birds that love these are things like woodpeckers and chickadees. Chickadees love them, but also nuthatch. And so if you remember, they're able to land like this on the bark. And so let's take a closer look. It looks like there's some corn in there and some seed, honey, and it's kind of soft and mushy to the touch. Another feeder here is this orange oriole feeder. And as you recall, I said we feed orioles away from our other feeders because those orioles are not social birds. And to give you some perspective here, our other feeders are pretty far away. They are right over there. That's Peanut. Say hi, Peanut. They're right behind that tree. All right, so our oriole feeder is orange because orioles are attracted to orange, and they also like to eat orange marmalade. As you can see, there are some ants and a wasp also enjoying that orange marmalade. I get that orange marmalade at the grocery store, and a good substitute if you can't find that is just grape jelly. So here is a hummingbird feeder. It's probably not the kind that you're used to seeing, but this one is just as good. It's made out of a mason jar, and it is full of sugar water. The reason that I've hung it here on my shed is because I have a pair of hummingbirds that live here in this cedar tree by my house, and they come back every single year, so I always make sure to hang this in the same place. And this year I just have one pair of hummingbirds. There have been years where I've had a couple, and what tends to happen with hummingbirds is that the males will fight for the food. So I always make sure to have an extra, which just in case there is a year where I might have a second, and I will hang that out in the yard somewhere. So hummingbirds tend to be a little more protective over their feeders, and you always want to make sure you have a backup just in case. A big part of bird watching is birdhouses. And as you can see here, I have this birdhouse high up in my tree. And this is a birdhouse that typically I would hang to attract a bluebird. I unfortunately do not have a bluebird in this house. I have sparrows. I don't mind though, because these sparrows come back year over year and they have several sets of babies. I really enjoy this because it's right outside my bedroom window, and I just really enjoy the sounds of the babies every year. It's a really pleasant sound to me. Not all people like that sound, but it's very, very nice. And if you notice, it's a pretty large hole. Here is another one of our birdhouses. It's hanging in the cedar tree. And as you can see, it's made out of a gourd. I do grow gourds, and I dry them and empty them and paint them myself. So here's one here. Here's another example here. And as you can see, there is a nest in each of these. So these are larger holes, which means larger birds will go in those, sparrows, things like that. Now here's an example of a birdhouse that I have hung for a wren, and a wren actually does live in this birdhouse. Now I'm going to zoom out so you can see just how small the birdhouse is and how small the hole is on this. So the hole is pretty small in comparison to the ones that we just saw. So smaller the hole, the smaller the bird. Not all birds live in birdhouses. A lot of birds build nests in trees, like the orioles that we talked about earlier. They build nests just in trees. The hummingbirds will build nests just in trees, and as you see, we have a lot of forested area back here, and so you'll see a lot of nests in those trees. When storms come through, we have a lot of nests that fall out of trees. Just because a birdhouse is out there, of course we're going to get a nest in it, but not all birds require a birdhouse to build their nest. They will, of course, build them in trees, but it is a nice gesture to put a birdhouse out for your birds. So consider the size of bird when you're considering your birdhouse. And if you're building a birdhouse, which I would of course challenge you to do, consider the size of the hole that you're drilling. So some interesting things about trees are holes. So we have a lot of trees with these types of holes, and what do you think would live in these types of holes? Here's another example. Get a look right in there. You probably guessed it. Owls. Drilling. The sounds that birds make are really, really unique from one bird to the next. Some birds are really pleasant and other birds are not so pleasant. So one of the most unpleasant sounding birds in Nebraska is the barred owl. So let's take a listen to that. Have you ever heard that in your backyard? It kind of sounds like a monkey, in my opinion. And I think one of the most pleasant sounding birds might be a cardinal. And it sounds a little something like this. What about the cardinal? Have you ever heard a cardinal in your backyard? The easiest Nebraska backyard bird to identify is the northern bobwhite quail. And my mom shared a funny story with me when I was a little girl about my grandma telling her about the bobwhites. And so I want to share that with you because I think it will help you remember bobwhites. They are the least modest bird because they call their own name. So bobwhites will always say Bob White, Bob White. And so here's how a bobwhite sounds. And hopefully you'll never forget this. Did you hear him calling his own name? He said, Bob White, Bob White. Not very modest in my opinion. In short, birds are diverse, they're interesting, they're full of personality, and they're easy to watch from anywhere. In some cultures, they say birds are connected to spirits, and I think I know why. My grandma was a big fan of cardinals, and every time I see one or I hear one, I think of her. I hope you enjoyed backyard bird watching as part of Girl Scout Spirit in Nebraska at Home Project. Please keep in touch, send us emails, hashtag Girl Scout Spirit in Nebraska, and check out our website at girlscoutsnebraska.org. Stay healthy, stay safe, and be well.